Very low attendance.
I don't think there's anybody else. We are live.
You're on.
Okay, it's 4:45. We've entered an executive session. We was limited to discussion of the legal briefing by the city attorney. And at this time, I'll entertain a motion to come out of the executive session.
So moved.
Motion's been made and seconded to come out of the executive session. Any discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We're in regular meeting. Next item on the agenda is discussion of stormwater recommendations.
Did y'all do minutes before I came in? I'm sorry.
Yes.
Yes, we did.
Okay, that's fine.
Sandy made a motion and Suzanne seconded it.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
So, Matt or Doug, which?
I'll start this and then we can pick up from there. So, at the end of your last meeting we had Rick Karkowski here from Thomas and Hutton. We talked a little bit about different ways to approach stormwater management plans. And I think there was consensus around trying what Rick was calling the black box methodology. So in your packet is a kind of stab at that. And in very kind of simplistic form, what this amendment would require is for every square foot of new impervious surfacing, the owner or the builder would have to provide 0.3 cubic feet, so now three-dimensional, of stormwater storage on site. So that would be to kind of play through how that would happen is the code already required a drainage plan, a stormwater management plan. So this would be a new requirement, but rolled into that existing requirement. We have a few kind of provisions as to how that would be done. It would have to be approved by the zoning administrator. It would have to be done through an approved method. So this would be kind of, I would say that determining an approvable method is something that the zoning administrator would do. And then there would be a provision that just explains that if you're using materials like a rock well, that he's gonna calculate the volume by subtracting out the mass of the material that's within that rock well to get to a true storage capacity number. So the staff shared some emails with Rick, with David, with Ron, just kind of about this idea and how it would be implemented. I think that little working group was satisfied that it was kind of doable and representative of what you all were thinking last month, and so it's here for your consideration today. And I do think that we can talk about we can talk about, there's another kind of list that I think Matt and the staff have been working on that would be some, what I would call tweaks to how we already administer the stormwater plan, giving folks more guidance on how to test. Right now, Matt is kind of, going out and kicking over buckets, timing. So we're talking about adding some detail there. Also providing detail on, so that would, the questions come up, is my surface pervious? It's crushed granite, or it's ROC, or it's, how do I really know if a material is truly pervious? Matt's been working on that, developing guidance, and generally it is. If you're putting a bunch of water on it and the water's soaking in, that qualifies as pervious. Another thing is how the methodology of installing these pervious pavers. We think that there has been scenarios where people install the pavers, the surface correctly, but there's no base below it. I do think that providing the requirement that there be a that there be a retention system is gonna fix that. But I think we could also kind of administratively advise folks on how to properly install those driveways. Anything else, Matt, that we kind of had talked about?
Not that I can think of.
So this is gonna be pretty broad in
In application?
application,
I think so.
new renovations. I mean, don't take this wrong, everybody's gonna get caught up in it as they move
Yes.
forward with
New,
any kind of a.
new impervious surfacing. Kind of anybody adding impervious surfacing, and I'd have to kind of reread it with an eye for this. I think the plan, and I don't know that we've talked about, what if somebody's just adding 5 square feet? Would they need to, I think in my mind, I've tied it to that 625 square feet requirement that's already in the plan that says this is when you have to do a stormwater management plan. I think I don't know that it's really written that way, but that maybe that would need to be a clarifying point,
Yeah, that was the one question I had on.
is when this
where-
gets triggered.
Yeah, what is
Is
the,
it still covered by that 625? If it is, then
Yeah.
it made sense. It's just not written in here. You know,
Okay,
kind of an
I think that's a good, I think kind of mentally jump to that, but it's probably not explicitly in there, but I think that makes sense if the will of the group is that 625 of new surfacing is a logical trigger of when you would add this.
Well, that's in there.
Well, I think it's in there actually for the plan. And then if you look at subsection Q, it says for every square foot. So I think you could take that to mean 1 square foot, you'd have to provide 0.3 square feet, so like a
Right.
milk jug, a hole. Some weird applications that came up, so we talked a little bit about this just with David and Ron, but, so I think it's pretty clear. If you add 1,000 square feet, this would say, okay, you're gonna have to add 0.3 cubic feet, so 300 cubic feet of some kind of storage. So 300 cubic feet, that would be 10 by 30 by 1 of completely open, like a completely open vault system under your ground, under your earth. Another way you could do that would be make that same system, but do it out of stone. But in the example of stone, what Rick is telling us is that when you do it out of stone, 60% of that area is taken up by the stone, so you only have 40% open. So then you have to increase that area to account for the fact that only 40% of it's, so you're now at more than twice that size. You're kind of at 700 cubic feet of rock well to get this, to be compliant. David brought up the example of, well, what if you, or maybe you confirmed, what if you just depressed, so you literally excavated out in your yard a similar size, just a depressed area. You ran water into kind of a low berm. The water goes in there, it sits in that depression. Does that achieve the same stormwater purpose? I think we concluded that it does. So that would be kind of the inexpensive way of,
catch pond, is that what they call it?
or yeah,
A
retention.
rain garden,
Retention.
basically.
Yeah.
Except I guess you'd make it, if you made it so big, it really wouldn't stay wet all the time. But yeah, that was kind of, again, if we're looking at like the 3 inches, 1,000 square feet, if you just took 1,000 square feet of your yard and made sure it could hold up to 3 inches of water, standing water, you've kind of satisfied this.
Yeah, and I think it would be hard, and we talked a little bit about kind of after we approve it, somebody gets a CO, somebody has depressed 3 inches in their lawn. Is that 3 inches depression gonna be there in 20 years from now? Is any, that's a challenge, I guess, of any of it.
Well, in that case, though, if they fill in that depression, it's going to be over 625 square feet, so they're going to have to get theoretically, would have to get a new
A
plan
new plan.
approved.
So I think you can get into scenarios that'll be challenging to
Regulate.
down the road. It'll be very
Well,
easy.
maintenance is what I thought you were asking. I'm hearing you say somebody actually builds in that pond area.
Right, I mean, so even with a gravel pit, it's going to start filling up with debris over time.
Yeah, I don't know how you regulate on private property, how.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we don't,
Maintain
you
a
know-
Catch pond, I'm gonna call it a catch pond, sorry.
And
Right.
we struggle with the same on
Yeah.
just regular construction. I mean,
Sure.
we've added, we inspect to the T that the handrail is there. You know, William gets invited into a house 10 years later and that handrail got ripped off by the kids. Does he have the authority 10 years after the fact, the third owner, to say, hey, wait a minute, you need to start doing some home improvement work, because it gets very challenging from an enforcement standpoint.
Yeah, nobody ever builds a room under the house after they build it.
Now, that's one that Matt has his eyes out for. That is the one that
Oh, I know.
we constantly get.
Run into it all.
Yeah.
Sometimes, not all the time. How, catastrophic loss, house burns down over here in Forest Trail. They've, just built it, and whatever happens, it's gone, and they're gonna start over. They weren't subject to this when they built it. Is the new one subject to this?
I think so. In the way it's written is, any new or altered impervious square. I think we're gonna tie it to 625, so assuming that it was more than 625 square feet, I think that would be the expectation is that it would be.
Okay, it wouldn't be much different from demolishing a house and starting over, really.
Yeah.
Condominiums, similar question. They, are they kind of exempt? I mean, and I'm thinking a catastrophic loss, whole complex, sea cabins are completely wiped out.
So
the
that's an
complex
excellent
is-
point, and something that has raised itself to me anyway after we distributed this. The section of the zoning code that this is in now would apply island-wide. So inside Wild Dunes, commercial districts, our lot coverage limits, which kind of in my mind, I would think I was tying this to, lot coverage limits are specific to zoning districts. So SR1 it's outside of Wild Dunes residential districts where lot coverage limits apply. Inside Wild Dunes, they have similar lot coverage limits, but they administer them. We do administer the requirement for a stormwater management plan in Wild Dunes. So that's a little bit of a question, I think, for the group, is where do we want this to apply? Residential only, residential outside of Wild Dunes only. When you trigger into commercial properties, there already is a requirement for retention, and it's actually regulated by the state at that point. So, and that's why you see commercial buildings, they have retention, they have, where residential don't. I think my kind of, just off-the-cuff recommendation would be to only apply it to, to the residential districts outside of Wild Dunes. I think that if there's consensus that it should apply inside Wild Dunes, I don't know. The only issue I see with that is that Wild Dunes does have a number of neighborhoods that are really, really small lots. You know, they're like Morgan Place, and it's kind of, the lots are laid out so that you pretty well build kind of property line to property line there isn't this kind of space. I don't think there would be realistically space to fit in retention. So I think my inclination would be to apply it to only residential districts outside of Wild Dunes, but I guess that's a question for the
You've
group.
got Twin Oaks, and all of the cottages, and, oh, yeah.
I would think it'd be slightly discriminatory to do that.
To not apply it? To,
Right.
to only apply it outside?
Right.
So,
I mean, if they don't have room to,
There are some that have room.
well, but I was getting at the point of you still have the 625 additional space. I guess would only come up if it was complete destruction and rebuild.
Yeah, vacant lot, gets built, a new house on it, it's kind of built lot to lot.
So I wouldn't see why you wouldn't apply it
Right.
equally across all areas. Because if it's a small lot already, they can't expand by 625 anyway. And if they can, then they should figure out the.
Figure it out.
so
That's
that
just
was,
logically to me. I don't know.
So the other kind of, when I think of this, I mean, and I guess I think of very much in terms of responsibility, for whatever reason, I guess it's selfish of me, but I think of the fact that the system outside of, the stormwater system specifically outside of Wild Dunes falls under the city's stormwater management responsibilities. Inside Wild Dunes, that's their infrastructure, they manage it, they install it, they build it. So if their systems were to be overwhelmed, it wouldn't, from my perspective, it would be kind of a private problem, not a public problem. I think that's kind of how I generally get there, but again, I could see the logic both ways. And I also don't know that I've ever heard of necessarily drainage. It almost seems as though because it's a newer development, that it doesn't have the stormwater problems that we have outside of the gates, where there's just some areas where there's no infrastructure, some areas where it's, minimal and hasn't been maintained for eons. So I think of the two areas as pretty distinctly different, inside and outside. But again, I certainly could see it both ways.
And again, I'll go back to kind of some comments I made earlier, is it needed down there? Do we need this overlaying in Wild Dunes? And that, I'm hearing you say perhaps not, because actually they have quite a bit of stormwater runoff management. They have huge ponds and management down there into the marsh, which is the natural water filter.
Yeah, we don't have, in Wild Dunes, we don't have the kind of lack of drainage that other areas have. And if there is a lack of drainage, it's usually sitting in someone's driveway and egresses into their garage.
It's kind of a private landowner's problem, not a
Yeah.
public problem where it's sitting in the road or running it.
With the
under
big
the
turnover in
neighborhood.
homes, saw a new owner, taking all the crap out of his garage because he had 2 feet of water in his garage. You gotta wonder why he didn't see that originally.
Mhm.
But they'll have to build a retention facility in their front yard to protect their house. We don't have the same problem that we have outside the gates.
When you started asking the question, my first thought was do it outside the gates, and as a need would perhaps arise, it can be revisited and applied, island-wide if necessary. But I didn't, with the cottages and some of the other properties with the property lines, there is no yard. I don't see how you're going to build back the same footprint and be, having to deal with this. That they don't have the land in some instances. And again, I'm thinking Twin Oaks, Sandpiper, Sand Crab, the villages, Grand Pavilion. No way you're doing that at Grand Pavilion House.
No, yeah, Harbor Court, the whole area,
Yeah.
there is no area. But there really isn't much flooding either. Not that I've seen.
Well, they go to pond, it goes to ponds.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
Well,
it's a
that's
modern
what I was
stormwater system.
getting at. You can take the little area over here on 21st even. The community has a retention pond that, so.
It nullifies the need for
Right,
individuals to have it.
So again, I don't know how to get to that I don't
If
think this
there's
would
a
apply
community-
to then I would think that you would need somebody from that community pond to say, if you're adding 1,000 square feet, can that pond actually
Handle
take
it.
that additional water? Because I look at, that's how we got to where we are now, is when they laid all this out, there was probably adequate drainage designed in, but over the years of people have put larger and larger houses, we've overwhelmed that. And will that happen to Wild Dunes in the next, 30 years? Don't know.
There's not much building going on. There's very few empty lots. And the rules apply to new building structures where you have to.
But when are
Maintain.
people going to start tearing down,
Oh, they're doing
3,000 square foot houses in Wild Dunes and put 5,000?
They're doing that now,
Oh.
but the rules as applies to how big of a house you can cover your lot with haven't changed. They're still basically set with the old laws. I mean, someone tore a house down the back of us. It was a, 4,000 square foot home, Sandy? The red brick one?
Yeah.
And they built that monster. But they have
It's
2
off
or
the
3
same-
acres.
Same footprint,
Yeah.
I thought,
Yeah. Yeah, the footprints, you're so regulated by the water on one side, or both sides, that there's not much of a new area. You can't build a monster house on a small lot.
All right, I think I've heard.
On the other hand, though, what you said, the rules need to apply to everyone, and I don't have a problem with that either. I mean, why are we separating out Wild Dunes from the rest of the community?
Well, I think there's properties that I'm identifying that can't do this. So what is the process for them to rebuild? Take a Twin Oaks, for instance. I mean, is it 5-foot setbacks on either
Yeah.
side of a cottage? It's
So
a
it
little
wouldn't
more
matter.
than that.
So it wouldn't matter? Is that what you're saying?
They
No,
couldn't-
it
they
can't
couldn't do it.
comply.
You can't put
Sandy's thinking you
60.
cannot comply on a
You wouldn't be
super
able to
small
rebuild.
lot.
We need a deeper vault.
Well, but they have a
Yeah,
water,
groundwater.
they aren't being flooded, their water moves. And it moves to the ponds right behind the Twin Oaks along the
Kind of
golf
David's
course.
point.
Yeah.
It was a community planned retention
Right. But
in the entire community.
But again, and then that was kind of where we were going, is how do you stop overflowing the design of that community retention? When people come outside and build, they just assume that ditch over there can handle the runoff, and they push runoff to it, and the ditch can't handle it, it just dumps it on somewhere else. Wild Dunes, I think, is not to that point where have overflown their capacity, so we don't see that problem, but will it be a problem in the future?
I understand your point.
Yeah, that's
It's
kind of
like what you're asking at Beachside.
Yeah.
If that pond overflows, it's coming across Palm and, heading to the creek over here. Again, I don't see it as an issue, so I'm not thinking we need to overlay into Wild Dunes at this point.
Well, it certainly could be revisited if the problem arises.
Certainly, and a lot of the communities, and I don't know if Beachside, I haven't read their master deed, if they can take down one of the 3-bedroom units and build a bigger unit in there. Their setbacks are very tight over here
Yeah.
too.
Matt, you've been.
There are 3 feet, I think, right? Which one, sorry?
The Beachside complex, so
Oh, the
you have the
beachside.
3-bedroom
Beachside.
cottages in the back, and then you have the 4-bedroom front beach homes.
The guy that's been trying to design
Yeah.
around a tree, it does seem like his community association rules are keeping him very hemmed in addition to being on a small lot with our setbacks.
Right.
I do not think the setbacks or their homeowners association rules would allow much expansion in that area.
Yeah, and I'm thinking the same thing, Jeff's point in Wild Dunes, that I think they're without going through everyone's master deed, that there are certain covenants and restrictions in the master deed that states that you have a Twin Oaks, all you can put back is that same footprint. You're not building a McMansion on that empty lot. And so my thinking is that this might hinder building back that footprint. And is it needed in that application? If that unit burns down, do we need to have them building a rain garden at number 1 Twin Oaks, for instance?
I see what you're saying. 'Cause
Yeah.
The HOA dictates,
I am assuming, I don't know.
and they
but
have an
those are-
arc.
They have had some
Oh, yeah.
modifications made to the footprint without expanding any of those footprints. But I've never seen anybody put an addition on a Twin Oaks or a Sandpiper or a Sandcrab unit. And I have to assume it's because the master deed restrict them to
Oh,
50 by
there was
50
one
or-
recently.
A new Twin Oaks? That is
It was across the
interesting.
street, Sandpiper or Sandcrab. It was a huge addition. They put, yeah, if you drive over there, it's right before the back entrance to the right. You know what I'm talking
Yeah,
about?
I do, but they've stayed inside their easements,
They did stay inside their easements, though.
so
I'll agree
I'm
with
not
you on
sure
that
what
one.
they had. We'll go up in the
They
end
have
of our
the
block.
exception to the rule. on
They
the
said it was
lot.
5,300 square feet, now it's up to 7,800 square feet or something, I don't know what it is. But they've got a lot of green space too, number 32, or 33. It's a monster,
Oh, the double lot.
34, yeah. It's the only spec house up there for $12.5 million.
Yeah.
It's enormous.
Oh, that one.
All right, any consensus on applying inside Wild Dunes? I think I saw Rich kind of say he might see the wisdom in applying. I think Suzanne.
I do, but I understand Sandy's point.
Tim?
So,
I do as well. I mean, I think that's a good point. You couldn't maybe apply it in some of those cases, when you think about some of those buildings, you just couldn't even do it.
and
So then you're
yeah.
into a situation where you can't apply it, so then it's like,
Well, I think there's some lots in,
Maybe we
on
just
Isle
need to-
Palms that are too small to do this, like Palm Court. I think they're under 8,000 square feet lots.
Okay.
If they had to, like the house burned down, there's no way you could put a retaining pond or a rain garden or whatever in that property. There's some other older properties where lots aren't that big, and I think everything's being utilized. So if they tear up the driveways and put up an addition or something.
So outside of Wild Dunes, we know that it will at least have, if it's an SR2, kind of small zoning district, non-compliant, it would at least have 20 feet in the front yard for the width of the lot, 20 feet in the backyard for the width of the lot, and 10 feet.
Side to side.
So we know they'll at least kind of have, and we've never had one that couldn't comply with those setbacks. Where in Wild Dunes, I mean, they are right at the line, kind of all the way around.
Well, I was looking up where square feet of impervious area, and 3,000 to 4,000 square feet will produce, you have to manage between 1,869 gallons to 2,492 gallons of runoff. Now, I think
Wonder how
that's,
that equates to cubic. We've gone cubic feet instead of gallons.
well, they've got a,
7.48.
what is this? They have a form.
You pilot.
But that's
I round to 7.5, but,
Okay, 7.5.
about 7.5.
Yeah,
Engineers.
divide by 7.5, yeah.
But that's a lot of water to manage on a small
But
parcel.
to his point, though, if you've got, an 80 by 100 lot with a 20-foot setback,
Right.
goes back to my thing about the depression.
A lot of space.
You got 1,600 square feet section that you can't build on, and if you depress that to hold 6 inches of water, you've satisfied whatever size house you built.
Also thinking, tying it to the smaller lots outside of Wild Dunes, The lot coverage limit would, if it's on sewer, max would be 3,200 square
Yeah.
feet. So the biggest you could build ever would be 3,200 square feet, which would roughly equate to 1,000 cubic feet of storage, right? Am I doing that right? So that would be 20 by 25 by 2. It's kind of a driveway.
Yeah.
So really,
Driveway.
the driveway, if the driveway, so we know that the driveway is gonna be at least 20 feet long, because that's a setback. 25 feet wide would be 2 cars, 2 feet deep of gravel would do it. That's pretty tight, right there on the seat of my pants. How about that?
That's good.
I'm using my
Gonna have to fact check that later.
Go to the head of the class.
Yeah, I think that is pretty close then.
Okay.
So you could do
So-
it.
I think you could do it outside of Wild Dunes. I mean,
To be honest,
Based on
with
size.
inside Wild Dunes, there's so many restrictions, I don't think you have to worry about it.
I just have never really heard of a problem inside Wild Dunes. Well, a stormwater problem, I guess, my caveat to.
Well, that's what,
Thank you for clarifying that.
Different topic.
that's kind of where, yeah, but my thoughts are going is like, again, how do you exempt property served by a communal drainage system?
Just zone, by zones, just eliminate that zone.
So that's one, I mean, that's, I think, the kind of easiest and cleanest, and I understand that it's not getting to beachside.
Right.
But that would, I guess, be my first suggestion, just carve out Wild Dunes. I think kind of a second suggestion would be you could carve out Wild Dunes and kind of add an exemption if you can show proof of a community retention system that would satisfy basically these requirements. So there'd be some kind of engineering work to put onto somebody who, I don't know, it might be more complex than just putting in a rain garden if you're in beachside. And then I can't think of, outside of Wild Dunes, I can't think of another community that would have community-wide retention. Maybe the one at 41st,
I was just
does
thinking that. What is
it have anything?
Seo's.
COs? I don't know if
I
they
don't
have.
think so.
Yeah, they were built in 1980s.
Yeah, so no. So it might just be
Each side.
beachside.
Yeah, years ago, you're asking about COs, it wasn't an issue because everything flowed to the ocean off of Palm. You didn't have quite the flooding because everything was open, and as the dunes have built up, it's created a natural dam for that natural flow.
So COs does have an issue in there, or still does?
No, we walk there all the time. so.
Yeah, I don't know that they have an issue, but I don't know, that could raise its ugly head at some time. Maybe there's a city drain right there, so it goes into the ditch and
I
down the
think there
drain.
is. I think the end of 42nd there.
41st, Palm and 41st, isn't there a culvert in that?
And 41st, and then also on 42nd.
Yeah. So they
No
depend-
retention.
They depend on your system.
Yeah,
Is that a community maintained?
it is. All right, I'm gonna say there was consensus on applying it outside of Wild Dunes. Yeah. Rich and
Yeah,
Suzanne,
it'd be easier
were you
to
all
say-
converted?
Do it by zone instead of by name.
Yeah, I would do it.
So apply it inside SR1, SR2, and SR3 is your,
Yes.
right?
Agreed.
Yes.
So only residential. We're not going to apply it to commercial outside either, because that's covered by the state from my perspective.
Yeah, the only other one would be like the LCC, I guess.
It's just the city.
So, am I saying
Limited
the right one?
commercial, LC, limited commercial,
Yeah, isn't that where all the houses,
that's GC3.
okay, sorry. That's why I was wondering, so GC.
GC3.
Don't they have a retention?
I don't think so. I could be wrong. I don't think
Rain
so.
garden, I thought there was, I haven't walked around there forever.
Where's that? I think all that water goes into that
Around this,
condominium.
around the Acme,
That
that kind of
parking lot,
neighborhood.
that
yeah,
floods out
that's
when it
GC3.
rains. I don't
They
think
can do
they're-
commercial.
It's probably, it's all coming down. I don't know what street that is, 9th Street, I guess.
I mean, I can't see them increasing the size of the houses in that property.
No.
But, so it's probably not worth, worried about it. I'm just going through thinking of areas we,
The only other thing I can think of, and this is pretty much, I think, just a technical, is Rick was kind of adamant that we needed to determine where the groundwater started and not allow these things below groundwater, because they're not having any impact of that. So, and we will talk about if we do that administratively, or actually put that in the code, that all of these systems, all of the storage area provided in these systems has to be located above the groundwater, the seasonal groundwater. So we'll talk about that. But I think that's kind of
Wordsmithing
technical.
on your part.
Yeah.
Yeah, you don't want it below.
Anything else? Everybody feel comfortable with it? And if so, you all could make a recommendation to. We still have a lot of other things in here.
Is
as
there any
well.
provision for, and I'm just thinking what David just said, nobody's adding on to a house over there, but if one burns down now, hurricane takes it out,
Yeah.
how do they do it? They don't have any.
well, that's what we just talked about, is
Yeah.
we're not including them.
We're not gonna include GC3.
It's just
So
SR1.
SR1,
I thought we
SR2.
were.
You guys talked a lot about houses burning down.
Yeah.
Very pessimistic, Sam.
But
it's a good point.
Listened to a lot of David Byrne this weekend.
Ah,
He's got some great tunes.
So, I have to tie this requirement to the 625 square foot
yes.
requirement that's in the stormwater plan. I'm going to modify it to apply only within SR1, SR2, and SR3. And we're gonna kind of wordsmith and be sure it includes a provision that any capacity has to be provided above the seasonal groundwater. Anything else? And if not, if you're at a point that you're comfortable making a recommendation, you could do that.
Oh, going down through the rest of it.
Yeah, yeah, you have some other things that we didn't change for this packet, but they're definitely, you've been working on it for a while, so there's a lot of.
One question, I guess, is, should we define impervious surface better than what we do?
I
would
think
think
that's
so.
something that, yes, I think we've had that on our list of,
Just hadn't gotten there. What?
but I don't know that I think that we have thought that defining a flow rate and installation guidance would be just an administrative policy, kind of like, the tree barricade, how you install a tree barricade. Code says you have to have adequate tree protection. How you do it is not in the code, so that if, there's some improvement in technology or something else, that's an administrative guideline that I think we thought we would administratively
Yeah.
work on and bolster. I don't think we anticipated that being in the code, but just accepting a kind of industry standard flow rate of what has to be able to penetrate into the ground. Good with that?
I think so, yeah.
Is this back to Matt's bucket method?
Yeah, that's right.
Yes.
I thought we
Yeah.
kind of talked about that last time. Definition of impervious.
This seems to kind of end, but it's not.
And the other thing, other than pavers, was like artificial turf becoming a question of if it's installed
Number 4.
correctly.
Oh, I don't really want to go down that road right now.
Well, yeah, no, it was more of if it's installed incorrectly, it's basically impervious.
Well, The problem is we're dealing with that now,
Yeah.
Morgan Creek.
Yeah.
Oh, I see what you're
Stormwater,
saying.
The definition of
Retention.
quality
And it will-
installation
Okay.
is really
it
questionable.
needs to relate up to Q.
Very loose.
Okay.
It's,
Yeah,
somebody I know did it around his pool,
Yeah.
and he was raving about it. I walked out there, it looked like there were moles underneath it. So I don't know what.
From a personal standpoint, we have that around our pool, and we have 5 inches of crushed granite
right.
underneath of it. And then the landscaping mat or fabric.
Fabric,
And
yeah.
then the grass. And it works wonderfully.
Well, I may
A
have to
granite,
use you
a
as an
granite
expert
base
witness
that
then.
water just,
Yeah, it's 5 inches, they dug out with it, leveled it all out, and then packed it down a little bit, and then put the,
and it just has sod over it?
just,
Artificial turf.
Artificial turf.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So it's a big filter.
and it works,
Yeah.
it works great.
Yeah, which, again, but,
Or not the same thing.
Yeah.
you know, if you just lay it down on the dirt, which some people do, it basically turns the dirt into concrete.
Yeah. No, I'm glad to hear that you say that it works well, because, I mean, this is our big problem with Morgan Creek.
It all goes back to the installation.
Yeah.
Doing it properly.
Yeah.
And, that base really helps level everything out as well.
Sandy,
I thought I read somewhere where the mats work, the flow rate,
that was in it,
gonna be governed administratively.
yes.
Okay, so that, to David's, should we define pervious or impervious?
Yeah, we're gonna do that. I think
Keep it
we
administrative.
agreed to do that administratively.
Okay.
Flow rate, installation guidance, testing, how to test, if you're a contractor, how do you know?
Yeah,
So
how
those
do
are
you-
gonna be
how do you
items.
design it?
Yeah, those are gonna be administrative, kind of a handout of this is how you do it.
Oh. See, I'm just looking at the stuff I marked, and again, this was just
There-
thoughts going through my mind when I was
There's a
reading through it.
typo.
Yeah, paragraph P,
4, I have it in
or, sorry,
Right above it.
QR4, there's a carved off sentence there. 4
red-
is gonna
the red
refer
line.
back to Q.
Just ends and it, yeah. Needed to keep going.
no, I think I followed, I had a question, but I think I answered myself on that one. The other one I kind of marked, and again, it was just, one of those, as I was reading through it, was, it's the red line with the 3, R3.
Yes.
The word mimic, and I was wondering, would it be better to say not exceed?
Post-construction runoff will mimic or not exceed pre-construction runoff of the site.
Oh, 2 runoffs. Oh, well, that's right, though.
Yeah, mimic would,
Post-construction runoff will mimic pre-construction runoff. So
He
2
just
runoffs.
wants the word changed.
the word mimic changed
Yeah.
to not exceed, so you're allowed to
So you
make
can go in
it,
a different direction.
you can make it be less, you just can't make it be more.
That's a good point.
That's kind of,
Mhm.
not that I
I
would
think
think anybody
mimic-
would design to try to, I gotta increase my runoff because he tells me so, but.
You're
I
looking at
think,
float
yeah, I
patterns.
think
It's
the
just-
intention there was flow patterns, that if
Okay.
if you were flowing
That's,
1,000 gallons an hour to your left, that you could continue to do that or
Oh,
reduce
okay.
that, but you couldn't now
Increase
stop
it.
that and flow 1,000 gallons an hour to the right.
can
Okay, that makes, yeah,
So maybe,
you
maybe,
specify? Well,
So then mimic makes sense.
the mimic makes sense in
Yes.
that case, yes.
but I would add mimic and not exceed, if that's what you, if that's the-
mimic,
It's the same.
but not exceed.
mimic, not to exceed.
Well,
I
I
mean,
think we
'cause
know
you're
that
saying-
already, we've already said that.
Yeah.
Well, you-
Well, again, I kind of think my scenario is nobody's going to try to,
Duplicate.
yeah, you go like, oh, what, you know.
I'm gonna
no,
ramp it up.
I'm gonna ramp it up to get it to what it used to be. After I did this, I got redirected from this big
Right.
pit I built over here because I didn't.
I have to ramp it up a little
Yeah,
bit.
so I don't think
So
it
I
was
think
really
it's
an
two
issue, it was
thoughts.
just a thought that went through my mind because I read it a different way. So yes, just ignore that, I guess, if everybody's okay with it. It's like that.
Yeah, you still can't adversely impact
Yeah.
adjacent property.
So, yeah, that kind of covers. And my other question was, should existing, in the stormwater management plan should include the following. Should it include an estimate of pre and post runoff? That was, again, I kind of think to answer that second question, you've got to know what the pre and post are. So it gets back to me, whoever's the license.
The designer
The
should be.
designer having to state that on his document, which puts it out there for anybody to challenge, keeps them honest.
So if Sandy's gonna burn down a house, you get the runoff first.
Well, I mean, they can calculate runoff, estimated runoff based on that, so.
Well, is number 2 not saying that? All existing and proposed topographical features of the lot, the existing and proposed drainage flow after that would be the
Existing and
design?
proposed, and then I think
So your-
topographical,
Drainage flow
existing drainage flow plan.
I
And-
read that
I mean,
as
you would
pre
use,
and-
you would use that information to calculate what the runoff should be for that lot. And then,
No, it says it's gonna include it,
Yeah.
all existing.
And proposed,
And
topographical features,
well, it just says flow patterns, it doesn't say quantity.
and I think we just add, I think that's a good add, and runoff quantity,
Drainage flow pattern and quantity.
drainage flow pattern, and quantity.
I mean, 3 kind of covers it anyway, but that's more
Yeah.
explicit. but-
Kind of make it, to David's point, is making sure they did their homework and
Yeah.
they, not.
Right, and I think
They
it
should be doing their homework anyway, but, so I think
Yeah,
from my
you don't wanna have to
perspective,
sit there and figure out rain
Yes.
flow and
yeah.
runoff.
And it kind of goes back from if you question it, it's much easier to have an
See it
engineer
there.
look at it and say,
Yeah.
does this number make sense?
Yeah.
Than it is to hire them to do a whole calculation.
Makes sense.
That was into my comments.
You sure you're not an attorney?
It's an engineer.
I'm an engineer. It's almost as bad. It's probably worse in some cases.
All right, I have 5 changes, and I think we've gone through them. I can repeat them if you want, but I feel good about
So
having
hopefully
them accurate.
our next one will be ready for us to.
Do you want to look at it one more time? David wants to. Jeffrey doesn't want to. What's the will of the group? I think those, to me, the 5 changes are pretty
Straightforward, yeah.
pretty straightforward. I mean, if you agree to them in concept, the changes will go to the city attorney, get put in a ordinance format, so it could be wordsmithed a little bit more.
Yeah.
If they see the need, but I think the concepts are straightforward. I don't think you need to, but David,
Okay.
I know you like to.
No, I mean, I was thinking, do we have to vote on this, or?
Yes, so you all would make a recommendation, you'd vote on a recommendation to recommend approval as amended tonight.
I'll
So,
make that recommendation if it's,
Second.
need to make it.
motion's been made and seconded to recommend approval of changes to
Stormwater.
stormwater section of our city ordinances. I guess-
As viewed,
As amended.
And discussed.
amended and
With
viewed.
5 amendments. Got it.
I guess we've had discussion, so. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion passes.
So this will go forward to city council, 2 readings and a public hearing.
And then come back.
And then come
And then
back.
come
And then come
back.
back.
It's a boomerang.
It should come back to you, but I'm gonna say that this has been very well through the planning commission. So I'm not planning to bring it back to you. I could, it doesn't take, I tell you what, I'll just put it on your agenda again for information, the final draft, at your next meeting, because it'll be going through the 2-month process with the council already. So,
Just as a point of thought with this, first reading for the budget is April, and we have a public hearing for the budget prior to the meeting in May. So I don't know if those things can be looped together or
Yeah,
not.
one kind of tidy
And you'll
public
have
hearing.
another meeting, like they could have first reading of this thing by name only, right? It comes back to planning commission, which is still before the public hearing.
So that actually would be in May. So they're not gonna get, I don't know that they'll get
They would get another
on the
crack at it.
agenda for a first reading in April.
You don't think you can get it on the agenda?
Maybe.
Okay,
That,
just timing wise, I was
yeah,
just thinking that.
that might work. So it'll
That's
either
April
be,
23rd.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so the next council meeting's then, and then there's already a public hearing scheduled for the budget prior to the May meeting. So that's what I was wondering, can we just do 2 at the same time, or
yeah,
on top of each
the
other?
sequencing of, sometimes to the workshop, sometimes to a committee, I'll need to work through that. So it might be not ready for April's first reading, but we'll work through that. We'll do it
Just want to point out.
as quickly as we can. They might have to have 2 public hearings. So, the only other things I have for this group are we have, at our next meeting, the Seaman Whiteside group is scheduled to come on the sea level rise adaptation plan. This group is an identified stakeholder in that process, so they're wanting to just kind of talk through sea level rise issues with the group, get thoughts and comments as they're kind of gathering information and input. So they're really at the first, they've only had one other meeting there, and then they're meeting with this group and the Environmental Advisory Committee in May. So that's forthcoming.
May 8th you're talking about.
Yes, is that the
Eventually.
that's second Wednesday, May 8th, yes. And then the other thing is the comp plan that you all have pushed off, not pushed off, you've made a recommendation to city council, and city council's agendas have just been so kind of bonkers, and they've wanted to dedicate a entire meeting to that, and it's just been challenging with all the other stuff going on. But that's still but we do expect that to also happen in May.
Got it. Busy month.
Busy month.
Okay, with nothing else, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Discussion?
No discussion.
All those in favor say aye. Opposed?
Nay.
I'm just glad the noise ordinance thing